flourishing along the peninsula, and they're attracting people from all walks of life. Night Beat's Joe Vasquez is in San Mateo County with the staggering new numbers.
Last several weeks, we have been investigating how and why this could be allowed to happen. And now Eyewitness News reporter Josh Haskell shows you what's being done to get people services and start moving some of these RVs out.
What you're about to hear is something almost no one is talking about. Overnight, a December court ruling gave cities the green light to legally take people's homes off the street, and thousands of families are waking up to find their RV gone, towed, impounded, auctioned, or destroyed. Their last shelter, their last safety net, erased in minutes. In December 2025, a court decision quietly changed the future of mobile homelessness in America, and the effects exploded into 2026. The ruling classified lived-in RVs as vehicles first, not homes. That distinction matters because, under earlier interpretations, cities had to treat occupied RVs with some housing protections. After this ruling, however, cities regained full legal authority to ticket, impound, and dispose of any vehicle parked illegally, even if entire families live inside. Legal analysts say the ruling impacted as many as 300,000 to 500,000 Americans who currently sleep in RVs nationwide. The case originated in the West Coast, where homeless RV encampments have expanded by more than 220% since 2020 in cities such as Los Angeles, Seattle, and Portland. Local governments argued RV clusters posed safety, sanitation, and environmental hazards, citing fires, sewage spills, and abandoned units as justification. The court sided with municipalities, granting them sweeping enforcement ability without needing eviction hearings or social support alternatives. That means a police tow truck can legally take someone's home without prior due process. The ruling also gave cities discretion over disposal timelines, meaning vehicles can be scrapped, auctioned, or destroyed faster than ever. Millions of Americans living paycheck to paycheck are now exposed to losing their shelter in a single morning sweep. And legal advocacy groups warn this ruling is one of the most consequential homelessness policy shifts in decades, setting the stage for mass removal of mobile housing in 2026. Before the ruling, RV dwellers typically received notice periods that ranged from 72 hours to 21 days, depending on the city. These warnings gave people a chance to move or contest citations. After the December judgment, over 40 major cities moved quietly from warning-based systems to near-immediate towing. Reports from early 2026 show that in Los Angeles, officers now tag RVs and return within 24 to 72 hours with tow trucks. And in some cases, impounds occur the same day if police determine the vehicle appears immobilized or unsafe. Seattle and Portland adopted similar protocols, suspending many previous grace periods due to what they describe as public health emergency conditions. Families, especially those living in older rigs, are being trapped. Many RVs that cannot start or lack current registration are automatically marked for removal. Data coming out of California suggests tow volume increased by 60% in the first 30 days of enforcement, and states across the Southwest and Midwest are adopting the same model. Policy researchers warn that this shift effectively transforms homelessness enforcement from regulatory to punitive. Instead of support systems, cities are using municipal codes to eliminate visible poverty. With rents up as much as 35% in some regions since 2021, and emergency housing already overwhelmed, even short notice would not save these families. The immediate tow shift leaves people with zero time to plan, pushing thousands onto sidewalks and into shelters that simply do not exist anywhere in America today. One of the most dangerous outcomes of the recent ruling is how much expanded discretion police and city agencies now have when dealing with lived-in RVs. Previously, officers could be restricted by homeless protection rulings like Martin versus Boise, which prevented criminal enforcement if no shelter was available. Now, because RVs are treated strictly as vehicles, police departments can bypass housing-related restrictions entirely. Officers can tow based on expired tags, flat tires, overstaying posted limits, or simply being parked in banned zones, which have expanded dramatically since 2022. In cities like Denver, new municipal codes now give law enforcement the power to relocate or remove encampments without needing proof of criminal activity. Some counties even allow towing at officer discretion for public safety, a term critics say is vague enough to cover nearly any scenario. Industry groups estimate that over 150 law enforcement jurisdictions have already rewritten their enforcement manuals to match the new legal climate. With staffing increases in task forces dedicated to vehicle-based homelessness, police now conduct regular sweeps instead of occasional enforcement. Advocates warn these policies disproportionately affect families, seniors, and disabled individuals, populations that turn to RVs as the last shield against literal street homelessness. The new legal environment removes almost every remaining safeguard and leaves personal circumstances irrelevant. If someone is parked where they should not be, even for survival, officers can now take the only shelter they have without question or consequence. Early reporting from towing logs, public records requests, and local news coverage shows an alarming spike in RV impounds in just weeks. Los Angeles, home to an estimated 14,000 to 16,000 vehicle dwellers, logged more than 1,100 RV tows in the first month alone, according to unofficial counts. Portland reportedly seized 300-plus units in January, a massive jump from prior monthly averages of 40 to 50. Seattle, which has seen its homeless RV population rise nearly 200% since 2019, is impounding at a rate of about 10 to 15 RVs per day along known corridors near freeways and industrial zones. Smaller cities are following the trend. Cities from Fresno to Colorado Springs to Phoenix have initiated new enforcement blitzes. Analysts estimate that across the United States, as many as 5,000 to 8,000 RV homes may have already been removed since late December, with projections that 2026 could see 50,000 plus tows nationally if policies continue to scale. Each removal represents entire families losing everything they own: clothing, documents, medications, tools, even pets, because tow companies do not inventory belongings, and most impound lots discard stored items quickly. And unlike traditional evictions, RV removals come with no relocation services, no motel vouchers, and no legal recourse if someone cannot pay fines. The scale is accelerating, and homeless advocates warn this may become the largest forced displacement of modern vehicle residents in United States history, with consequences that will echo for years. For hundreds of thousands of Americans, an RV is not a camping accessory. It is the final fallback between instability and life on the street. Experts estimate that as many as 500,000 to 700,000 people nationwide live in vehicles at least part-time, including retirees, disabled workers, laid-off families, veterans, and single parents. When a tow truck takes an RV, the occupants are instantly unsheltered, with no backup plan, no lease, and nowhere to go. Many families bought older RVs during the pandemic, when rent increases surpassed wages in nearly every major city and eviction moratoriums expired. For them, the RV served as a last piece of dignity: a locked door, a bed, heat, a place to cook food, and protection from weather. Now, when these units are seized, they lose identification documents, birth certificates, school supplies, and children's toys, often everything they own. Social workers in California and Washington report increases in tent encampments featuring families who previously lived in vehicles. Some shelters track that 40% or more of new arrivals were vehicle dwellers, but beds remain full and wait lists can stretch weeks to months. Cities remove the RVs but provide no replacement shelter, creating a humanitarian disaster hiding behind municipal cleanup language. Losing an RV does not just push people into tougher circumstances. It erases stability, safety, and forward mobility, trapping families in deeper homelessness with no path back to anything resembling normal life in modern America. Once an RV is towed, the nightmare is only beginning. Cities do not store these rigs indefinitely. They rapidly move them into the auction or scrap pipeline. Under current municipal codes, impound lots can legally dispose of a seized RV within 10 to 30 days if the owner fails to pay fees. But with towing charges often exceeding $500 to $1,500, plus daily storage costs up to $125 per day, reclaiming a towed RV becomes financially impossible for most. Advocacy research suggests that 80 to 90% of impounded RVs are never recovered because owners cannot cover the bill. Cities then place the vehicles up for auction, typically in bulk salvage sales, where high-mileage, cosmetically damaged rigs sell for mere hundreds of dollars, sometimes less than $50. Certain cities even scrapped RVs outright due to contamination, mold, or hazardous damage, offering no chance for redemption. The auction system is lucrative for governments and tow operators. Large metropolitan areas generate millions in revenue annually from impounded vehicles of all kinds, and with RV impounds skyrocketing, those totals are rising. The people losing these RVs get no reimbursement, even though these units represent their last asset, often purchased with life savings or tax returns. Critics argue this process is not cleanup. It is asset stripping, taking the only property poor Americans possess and recycling it into government budgets while instantly erasing whatever security they had left. Once that RV is gone, the path back to housing becomes nearly impossible for anyone caught in this system. Even families able to locate where their RV was taken face a brutal reality. Reclaiming it almost always requires costly repairs before release. Municipal towing laws often mandate vehicles be street legal to leave impound lots. That means a current registration, working lights, functioning brakes, and even new tires if a flat is recorded. Older rigs, especially those purchased cheaply during pandemic selling frenzies, frequently need thousands of dollars in mandatory work. Mechanics estimate typical repair costs on towed RVs range from $1,000 to $7,500, depending on neglect, age, and condition. For a person already homeless or newly unemployed, that expense is insurmountable. Add that to towing and daily impound fees, and the bill can balloon to $3,000 to $10,000 within a week. Many RV dwellers rely on those vehicles because they cannot qualify for traditional housing, often due to evictions, poor credit, medical debt, or job loss. This legally weaponized financial barrier means that even the most determined families cannot claw their way out once towed. Cities argue that dangerous or non-functioning RVs should not return to streets. Advocates counter that intentional cost barriers are a quiet strategy to permanently eliminate vehicular homelessness without addressing root causes. The end result? People are deliberately priced out of reclaiming their only shelter. The tow is not just inconvenient, it is a permanent eviction by invoice, and most never recover their home or their sense of security in America again. Traditional evictions involve documentation, court filings, and legal protections, even when landlords move aggressively. RV dwellers receive none of that. When a tow truck arrives at 5 a.m. for a sweep, the eviction happens instantly. In most impound records, occupants are not listed, only the vehicle's VIN. People may return from work, school drop-offs, or grocery trips to find their entire home disappeared. No hearing, no defense. In cities applying the ruling to the fullest extent, police can tow on the basis of expired registration, parking limits, or public nuisance designations, all without offering emergency alternatives. Data from homeless legal clinics in Washington and Oregon show that the majority of RV dwellers lose their rigs when they are not present to object. Those lucky enough to witness the tow have minutes to gather belongings, and officers frequently deny access to enter the RV once a tow order is issued. For parents, that means children's clothing, food, medication, identification, and personal keepsakes vanish. Agencies treat it as removal of personal property, not displacement of residents. Legal experts call this a loophole eviction, a method of clearing communities without triggering homelessness protections. Municipalities defend the practice by defining vehicles as temporary shelter, not permanent housing, meaning none of the tenant rights apply. Overnight, a family with 4 walls, even walls on wheels, becomes street homeless, invisible on paper, and impossible to track for support programs that might otherwise help them survive. While the court ruling opened the door, local governments are now sprinting through it. Over 120 municipalities are considering or have already passed new ordinances restricting where lived-in vehicles may park. Some cities have banned overnight parking citywide, leaving only private campgrounds and costly RV parks, many charging $800 to $1,500 per month. Others created no camping corridors spanning miles near schools, beaches, parks, industrial areas, and even rural suburban roads. San Diego's latest ordinance prohibits sleeping in vehicles anywhere between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m., making legality nearly impossible. Denver, Phoenix, and Las Vegas are mapping GPS-based restricted zones that blanket entire metro areas. Cities argue the laws address community complaints, citing sanitation, clogged curbs, and safety hazards. Critics argue these policies criminalize survival. The timing is also critical. Rents are up an average of 31% since 2020, and mortgage rates doubled, pushing more people into vehicles as last resort housing. RV parks report full capacity with wait lists stretching months, leaving no legal option for those forced out of neighborhoods and streets. With fewer legal places to exist, families face constant displacement, police pressure, and the threat of confiscation. Analysts describe it as housing by elimination, shrinking legal geography until people must either disappear, enter shelters that do not exist, or leave town entirely. Policy experts warn the wave of laws is accelerating, turning homelessness into a mobility crime rather than a social issue that requires real solutions. With legal authority and new anti-parking rules in place, law enforcement is shifting focus to visible concentrations of vehicle dwellers. Police call them clusters, neighborhoods call them encampments, and advocates call them communities. Sweeps now occur systematically, often rotating block to block in a 72-hour cycle to prevent regrouping. Los Angeles and Seattle have launched dedicated task forces combining public works, sanitation, and policing, some operating with $50 to $100 million annual budgets. Cities target areas with large numbers of RVs near freeways, industrial lots, and waterfronts. Once cleared, trucks return days later to ensure no one returns. The sweeps are precise. Tow trucks sit staged nearby, while officers issue citations and mark vehicles before forcibly removing them. Residents often scatter temporarily, only to reconvene elsewhere, triggering the sweep cycle again. Critics call it churn displacement, where the goal is not solving homelessness, but making it less visible. Communities inside these clusters include kids, elderly residents on fixed incomes, gig workers, Amazon warehouse employees, and disabled veterans, populations with nowhere else to go. City data suggests that more than 80% of RV dwellers swept during operations lack access to alternative shelter, but enforcement continues. The psychological toll is severe. Constant fear of waking up surrounded by flashing lights, losing property, or being separated from family. These sweeps represent a systemic attempt not to house people, but to erase them from public space entirely, creating invisible homelessness across America. As cities crack down on visible RV clusters, many vehicle dwellers are disappearing from main roads, but not because they found homes. They are retreating into dangerous, remote, and isolated areas where enforcement is slower and neighbors will not call police. Community trackers report growing numbers of RVs appearing in abandoned parking lots, old industrial zones, creek beds, national forest turnouts, and dead-end rural streets. Some police departments admit these areas are harder to patrol, essentially pushing homelessness out of sight rather than solving it. But the unintended consequences are enormous. Remote locations mean longer emergency response times, particularly in cities where RV fires have surged 150 to 300% since 2021 due to faulty generators, propane issues, and DIY electrical systems. Families living farther from city centers also lose access to food banks, job opportunities, health clinics, and schools, pushing them deeper into instability. In some regions, residents park several miles apart to avoid forming a cluster, living as solo islands, constantly watching for patrol cars or angry business owners. Meanwhile, RV parks and private lots that once tolerated long-term stays are tightening rules or shifting to tourism, pricing out those who relied on them. Advocates call this trend the fragmentation of mobile homelessness, where instead of one supportive community, people are scattered and vulnerable, easy to tow, easy to overlook, and increasingly disconnected from resources that could help them climb back to stability and safety. With enforcement intensifying, RV dwellers are adopting survival strategies similar to stealth van lifers, but with far higher difficulty due to size and appearance. Stealth RV living means moving constantly, never staying longer than a few hours, shutting lights at night, using blackout curtains, and avoiding any sign of habitation. Families report rotating between dozens of parking spots weekly, including big box retail lots, park and rides, churches, industrial parks, and truck stops. Towing spikes fastest in areas where RVs appear stationary. Mobility is now protection, but this lifestyle is brutal. Moving every 4 to 12 hours burns fuel, Expensive when gas sits between $3.50 and $5.50 per gallon nationwide. It also keeps kids awake, disrupts school routines, and creates a perpetual sense of panic. Some residents even tow their rig with unlicensed vehicles or use bicycles and borrowed cars to shuffle spots, anything to avoid being noticed. Meanwhile, basic services like water fill-ups, waste disposal, and shower access require planning and money, often pushing people into unsafe improvisation. A major concern is exhaustion. Police logs show many RV impounds occur when people stop moving from sheer fatigue. Stealth RV living replaces community with isolation and turns housing into a rolling emergency where survival depends on constantly staying ahead of tow trucks. Experts warn this mobility-driven anxiety creates long-term mental and physical health consequences, turning already precarious lives into an unsustainable race that many will eventually lose through sheer exhaustion. As RVs are impounded, destroyed, or priced out of legal mobility, displaced residents often downsize, not into homes, but into smaller vehicles. Advocates on the ground report a noticeable shift. More families are now living in cars, SUVs, and minivans that lack heat, storage, privacy, and space for even minimal comfort. National estimates suggest 600,000 to 800,000 people sleep in vehicles of all types, and that number appears to be climbing as RV-accessible parking disappears. Cars are easier to hide and move, flying under the radar in apartment lots, grocery store parking, and quiet neighborhoods, but they offer far less safety. Children sleeping in cramped seats develop back and posture issues. People cook out of coolers or eat fast food, worsening nutrition and health. Storage limits force families to discard clothing, bedding, work tools, and personal documents. Shelter staff say many car dwellers arrive at night seeking warmth after gas tanks run dry. Police policies toward car sleepers vary, but aggressive cities still tow, impound, or issue massive fines for illegal lodging. Parents often cycle between cars and emergency rooms when temperatures drop. In winter, cold exposure inside a car can be deadly. Unlike RVs, which provide insulation, bathrooms, and electrical systems, cars offer mere metal shells between families and the street. The transition from RV to car represents a collapse in stability, not an escape from homelessness, pushing people closer to tents, sidewalks, and shelters that already cannot cope with existing demand. Cities may be towing RVs rapidly, but they are not increasing shelter capacity to match the surge in displaced residents. Across the West Coast and Sun Belt, shelters report full capacity with hundreds on wait lists, and many regions require appointments or lottery-based intake systems. Some facilities prioritize individuals rather than families, splitting parents and children. Others enforce strict curfews, prohibit pets, or require sobriety, all barriers preventing desperate families from entering. Data from Los Angeles shows only one shelter bed available for roughly every 3 people seeking one, and that is before RV sweeps push thousands more into the system. Rural areas fare even worse, with counties offering 0 emergency shelters for families. As displacement accelerates, cities quietly acknowledge there is no infrastructure to absorb newly homeless RV dwellers. Instead, many end up in tent encampments, which themselves face removal sweeps, turning housing instability into a constant cycle of displacement. School districts report increases in McKinney-Vento students, children experiencing homelessness, showing that vehicle living is shifting into more visible child displacement. Charities and churches attempt to fill gaps, but demand outpaces resources. With rent increases averaging 7 to 12% year over year, federal housing vouchers maxed out, and affordable housing waitlists stretching years, the system is fundamentally incapable of catching those falling from RV living. The result is predictable: more tents, more sidewalk encampments, and deeper poverty wherever RVs disappear from American streets and neighborhoods. Advocacy groups, legal aid organizations, and civil rights lawyers are preparing challenges to the December ruling, but legal timelines move slower than tow trucks. Early filings suggest lawsuits may argue that the ruling violates 8th Amendment protections, particularly the prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment when no shelter exists. Others will invoke due process, claiming cities cannot seize what functions as a primary residence without legal eviction proceedings. In Seattle and Los Angeles, legal teams are gathering testimonies, photos, and tow logs to build large-scale class action suits representing tens of thousands of displaced residents. But attorneys warn legal victories may take years, while enforcement escalates monthly. Meanwhile, state legislatures may attempt to pass protections, such as designating inhabited vehicles as primary residences, but those efforts face opposition from political leaders running on anti-homelessness platforms. Several cities may join counter-litigation, arguing municipal authority must supersede individual rights to maintain sanitation and business activity. Advocacy networks project that, by 2027, the courts could face the largest homelessness-related caseload in modern history, with stakes affecting millions of low-income Americans who rely on vehicles for shelter. Until then, tow trucks operate freely, leaving families to wait for legal relief that may come too late. The conflict will shape national policy. Either homelessness becomes criminalized by location, or the country is forced to recognize vehicle living as a necessary stage in America's affordability crisis that demands real solutions. When the RV is gone, shelters are full, and cities ban sleeping anywhere, where do the displaced go next? That is the unspoken fear behind every sweep tow and ordinance. The United States is facing a cascading housing collapse that began with rent spikes and pandemic-era inflation and is now becoming visible on highways and curbside shoulders. Analysts warn the country is moving toward a scenario where street homelessness multiplies, not because people refuse help, but because no help exists. Tent cities expand after every major sweep. Families with kids begin living in 24-hour restaurants, Walmart lobbies, and emergency rooms to stay warm. Elderly RV dwellers, many on Social Security, end up sleeping outdoors for the first time in their lives. Cities that remove RVs but provide no replacement shelter effectively manufacture homelessness, pushing Americans deeper into crisis while pretending to solve it. The long-term consequences are staggering. Increased medical costs, police spending, school disruption, and eventual public health emergencies. And the population at risk is enormous. With as many as 1.5 million households one paycheck away from vehicle living, any wave of layoffs or economic shocks could push people into the pipeline now being cleared. The question is not just who loses RVs today, it is who loses them next month. America now faces a test: build affordable housing and legal stopgaps, or watch a hidden crisis explode into one the nation can no longer ignore or pretend does not exist. This crisis doesn't stop here. It's only getting worse. Are these policies helping communities or destroying lives? Share your perspective below. I want to hear your thoughts. And if you want to see where this story goes next, watch the next video right here. We're exposing the states planning even harsher RV crackdowns in 2026. You do not want to miss it.